David Cameron says he is hopeful of reaching a deal with European leaders in February that will allow him to hold the UK's EU referendum. The Prime Minister said the in-out vote would follow if agreement was reached on his reforms at next month's summit. He also said he would stay on as PM even if he ended up on the losing side. He told Andrew Marr he did not think a UK exit was the right answer but promised everything necessary to make it work if there was a vote to leave. The in-out referendum has been promised by the end of 2017. Asked whether he was suggesting the referendum could be held this summer, Mr. Cameron said, "That is what I would like to see, is a deal in February, then a referendum that would follow. It would take place later if no agreement was reached," he said. Mr. Cameron reiterated his desire to campaign for the UK to remain in a reformed EU, but said he would rule nothing out if his demands were refused. Welfare freeze. On the question of whether he would stay on as PM if he ended up on the losing side, he said, "The answer to that question is yes." He said his priority was to hold a referendum and to abide by what the British public say. The question put to voters would be whether to stay in or leave the EU, he said, not this politician's future or that politician's future. One of his key proposals, a 4-year freeze on in-work benefits for EU migrants, has met with stern opposition from his European counterparts, but Mr. Cameron said it was still on the table until an equally powerful and meaningful alternative was proposed. Asked whether the measure could be extended to UK nationals to overcome the opposition, he replied, "When I have got an announcement to make I will make it." The Prime Minister also played down reports of a deal involving NATO troops being based in Poland in exchange for support on his proposals, saying it had not been raised in any of the conversations he had been involved in. Ministers are to be allowed to campaign for either side in the referendum once negotiations are complete, a measure Mr. Cameron said he had always intended to take and described as fair, sensible, and reasonable. Disgraceful. A number of cabinet ministers are thought to favour an out vote. Speaking on BBC Radio 5 Live's Pioneers Politics, senior Conservative backbencher David Davis said he would be voting to leave, and that nothing the Prime Minister said in his interview had convinced him otherwise. He predicted most of his backbench colleagues would probably join him in voting for a Brexit. Mr. Davis also said it was disgraceful that contingency plans were not being made inside government for a UK exit from the EU. "It's a very complicated operation to carry out if it happens," he added. The Leave.eu campaign said, "The sooner the Prime Minister produces his worthless deal the better, then we can move on to the genuine campaign and the British people can at last have their say and leave the outdated political circus that the EU has become."